Okay, so those were our elements. So if we think back to our recipe, those are all of the ingredients that we can use in an artwork. And our principles are how we organize them in artwork, the way that we put them together. So we're going to talk about these 6 principles. First, we have balance. So this is a sense of stability or equality in the visual weight of an artwork. Now, when we talk about balance, we have to talk about lines of symmetry. So a line of symmetry is a line that cuts an artwork in half. And what we are weighing here, our visual weight, is the equality of the elements. So if we cut this artwork in half, and hypothetically, if we put it on a teeter-totter, and we put this half on one side and this half on the other side, is one side visually heavier than the other? Is there more value or color or texture on this side than there is on this side? So that is what we were looking for with balance. It's the equality in that visual weight. Think about teeter-totters. So, types of balance. We have symmetrical balance. So when there are equal elements on both sides of the line of symmetry. Now this here is our symmetrical artwork. So if we cut this artwork in half, there's about the same amount of value in it. There's about the same amount of implied form because there's 2 women painted to look 3-dimensional. There's about the same amount of color and texture and all of those elements. The one big misconception with symmetrical balance is that it has to be perfect, and that is incorrect. It just has to be about the same on both sides. Now this one is our asymmetrical artwork. So that means that there are unequal elements on both sides of the line of symmetry. So if we cut our great wave in half, there's way more color and texture and lines and positive space than there is on this side. This side is mostly negative space with a little bit of color and a little bit of lines over here. So our teeter-totter is way heavier on this side than it is on this side. So this is asymmetrical balance. And then radial balance is when we have elements that repeat around a circle, creating multiple lines of symmetry. So our shapes repeat over and over and over and over again in a circle. So do our colors, and so do our lines, repeating around in a circle. Now, I don't have a teeter-totter analogy for this one, but this one is more like a perfect pepperoni pizza where there are the same amount of pepperonis and cheese on each slice. Then we have emphasis. So emphasis is when there are points of interest that pull the viewer's eye to important parts of the work. So if we think about where does the artist want us to look? The artist wants us to look here in this artwork. And the artist is using different elements, those ingredients, to make us look there. So the artist is using value. So there's a really light value here that pulls our eye there compared to how dark it is in the rest of the artwork. There's also those bright primary colors like that come from the crayon box, which we know are intense colors, compared to the really darker browns and grays all around it. The artist is also using implied line of these rifles pointing at this man to use implied line to create emphasis. So this artist is using value, color, implied line to create emphasis. Next is movement. So movement shows action that directs the eye around the piece. And this is not necessarily just about seeing someone running or skipping or jumping around an artwork, but this is how our eye moves around a piece that has action in it. So in our great wave, our eyes move along its curving diagonal lines here. So the diagonal curving lines are creating movement up and over the wave. Next we have pattern, and we're pretty familiar with pattern. It's just the repetition of elements. So what are we repeating? What elements are we repeating? So this artwork uses repetition of geometric shapes to create a pattern on this man here. And there's a repetition of organic shapes here on this woman. Here in this artwork, we have a floral pattern which repeats these different floral clusters on one side and then again on the other. Rhythm is what I call a super principle because we are combining pattern with movement. So regular repetition of elements to create visual movement. Just like music can have rhythm, so can art, and it's that same idea of repeating something. In music, it's a beat, but in art, it's an element. So what are we repeating to move us through this composition? So here in this sculpture, we're repeating the bodies of these spiders again and again and again in this diagonal line to move our eye this way through the sculpture. And then we might move down the legs like this. And then with this painting here, we have that same idea, but these are real forms. These are implied forms because this is a painting of ballerinas. So we are repeating the implied forms of the ballerinas to move our eyes diagonally this way. Next, we have unity, and this is the sense of cohesiveness and wholeness in an artwork. So the idea that nothing sticks out. This is the opposite of emphasis. Nothing sticks out. Nothing is supposed to be unusual or different. So everything feels like it belongs together. That does not mean that everything looks exactly the same. This artwork is creating unity through its colors that it's using. So it's mostly cool colors, those blues and greens and violets and a little bit of yellow thrown in there. And then the form of these rolling hills are all organic. So that creates a sense of unity through this entire painting. Last, we have contrast. So contrast is the great difference between two elements. Think opposites. So here in both of these artworks, we have bright white values contrasted with really dark black values. Here we have the same thing, a really dark black outline with light, bright values. So contrast is the great difference between two things. We also saw that up here with geometric and organic shapes. So just think opposites. So those are our elements and principles. They are the foundation for all of the art that we make. The elements are the parts and pieces that we put together in an artwork using the principles to create composition. So how we lay out our artworks.